She thought she was only coming west to teach, but one unexpected encounter would change everything she believed about home, family, and love. What happens when the new school teacher and the most guarded man in town cross paths in the most unlikely way? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The dusty main street of Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1885, shimmered under the relentless summer sun. Clara Bennett stepped down from the stagecoach, her cream-colored dress already gathering a fine layer of frontier dust. At 25, she had left behind her life in Boston after her father's passing, armed with nothing but determination and teaching credentials. "Miss Bennett, I presume?" A stern-faced older woman approached. "I'm Mrs. Holloway, head of the town council. We were beginning to worry you wouldn't arrive before the school term." Clara straightened her back. "The journey was longer than expected, but I'm here now and eager to begin my duties." Mrs. Holloway's expression softened slightly. "The schoolhouse is ready, though I must warn you, our previous teachers rarely lasted more than a season." As they walked, Clara felt the weight of curious stares from the townspeople. A group of men outside the saloon paused their conversation to watch her pass. Among them stood a tall figure whose intense gaze seemed to pierce right through her. "Who is that man?" Clara asked quietly. Mrs. Holloway followed her gaze. "That's Ethan Morgan. Owns the largest cattle ranch outside town. Keeps to himself mostly, except when he brings his cattle to market or needs supplies." Clara nodded, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her chest as the cowboy tipped his hat slightly in acknowledgement. "Your accommodations aren't quite ready, Mrs. Holloway continued. "The widow Johnson was supposed to prepare a room for you, but she's tending to her sick sister in the next county." Clara's heart sank. "Where am I to stay tonight?" "The boarding house is full with railroad workers. There's only the hotel." The hotel looked respectable enough from the outside, but Clara's teacher's salary would quickly disappear if she stayed there long. As they approached the establishment, a commotion erupted from the saloon. A man stumbled out, clearly intoxicated, followed by Ethan Morgan, who had him by the collar. "You'll not speak of ladies that way in my presence, Miller." Ethan's voice was low but carried across the street. "Now apologize to these women." The drunk man mumbled something that might have been an apology before staggering away. Ethan turned, his eyes meeting Clara's briefly before he approached. "Mrs. Holloway." He nodded respectfully. "Is this our new school teacher?" "Indeed." "Miss Clara Bennett from Boston. This is Ethan Morgan." "Ma'am." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair with a slight curl. "Welcome to Redemption Creek." "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," Clara replied, noting the kindness behind his weathered features. "I couldn't help overhearing your predicament," Ethan said. "My sister Sarah has a small cabin on my property. She's visiting relatives back east until spring. You'd be welcome to stay there until something more suitable is arranged." "Mrs. Holloway looked surprised. "That's unusually generous of you, Mr. Morgan." "It's nothing," he shrugged. "Can't have our new teacher sleeping in the stables." Clara hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition. The cabin's sitting empty, and it's just a short ride to town." Mrs. Holloway leaned closer to Clara. "Mr. Morgan is one of our most respected citizens. His offer is proper and would solve your immediate needs." Clara considered her options, which were admittedly few. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I accept your kind offer." An hour later, Clara found herself riding beside Ethan Morgan in his wagon, her trunk secured in the back. The landscape opened up beyond the town, rolling hills dotted with sagebrush, framed by distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Clara remarked, breaking the silence. "It grows on you," Ethan replied. "Different from Boston, I imagine." "Very. But there's something honest about this land." Ethan glanced at her with newfound interest. "Most Easterners just see hardship." "Oh, I can see that too," she smiled. "But there's freedom here, room to breathe." As they crested a hill, a sprawling ranch came into view. A large main house, barn, corrals, and several smaller structures scattered nearby. "Morgan Ranch," Ethan announced with quiet pride. "Been in my family for 20 years. My father claimed this land when there was nothing but wilderness and hostility." "It's impressive," Clara said sincerely. "You've built something substantial here." They continued past the main house to a small cabin nestled against a stand of cottonwood trees. It was simple but charming, with a small porch and chimney. "It's not fancy," Ethan said as he helped her down from the wagon, "but it's solid and comfortable." Inside, the cabin was clean and surprisingly cozy. One main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a bed in the corner with a colorful quilt. "One bed," the cowboy said matter-of-factly, "but it's sturdy. Sarah made the quilt herself." Clara blushed despite herself. "That's perfect. I don't need much space." Ethan nodded, suddenly seeming uncomfortable with her presence in the intimate space. "There's a pump out back for water. Outhouse is just beyond. I'll bring your trunk in and then leave you to settle." After he'd gone, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Through the small window, she could see the ranch stretching toward the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this small cabin on a stranger's land, she felt an unexpected sense of possibility. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the cabin's small window, casting warm patterns across Clara's quilt. She awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day rushed back. This was her new home, at least temporarily, in this wild, unfamiliar territory. Clara dressed quickly in one of her plain work dresses, pinning her hair into a practical bun. As she stepped onto the porch, the vast Wyoming landscape took her breath away. The morning air was crisp and clean, nothing like Boston's industrial haze. A young boy, perhaps 12 years old, approached carrying a small basket. He had Ethan's features, though softer, not yet hardened by years of ranch work. "Morning, ma'am," he called out. "I'm Thomas Morgan. Uncle Ethan sent me with some breakfast for you." He held out the basket. "Fresh eggs, biscuits, and preserves, and coffee in the jar there. Still hot." "Thank you, Thomas. That's very kind. Please thank your uncle for me." Clara accepted the basket. "Do you live here on the ranch as well?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, ma'am. My pa died 3 years back. Uncle Ethan took me and my ma in. He says I'm to start at school next week." "That's with you, ain't it?" "Yes, it will be," Clara smiled. "I look forward to having you in class. Uncle Ethan says I'm to drive you to town when you're ready. The wagon's all hitched up." Clara ate quickly, savoring the fresh food, then gathered her teaching materials. Thomas proved to be a talkative companion on the journey to town, filling the silence with stories of ranch life. "Uncle Ethan's the best rancher in the territory," he declared proudly. "Weathered 3 bad winters when other folks lost everything. He works harder than anybody." "He seems very dedicated," Clara agreed. "He is. Ma says he works too hard since Pa died. Says he's taken on too much responsibility." Thomas lowered his voice. "I heard Mrs. Holloway tell my ma that Uncle Ethan needs a wife, but he's too stubborn to court anyone." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure your uncle's personal affairs are his own business, Thomas." The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden building with a bell tower. Several children were already waiting outside with their parents, all of whom regarded Clara with open curiosity. Mrs. Holloway was there to make introductions. As Clara greeted each family, she tried to memorize names and faces. There would be 18 students ranging from 6 to 15 years old, a typical arrangement for a frontier school. "I still can't believe Ethan Morgan offered you his sister's cabin," Mrs. Holloway whispered as the last family departed. "He's never been one to get involved in town matters beyond necessity." "It was simply a practical solution," Clara replied, uncomfortable with the implication. "Of course, dear." Mrs. Holloway smiled knowingly. "Now let me show you the supplies we've gathered for the term." The day passed quickly as Clara organized her classroom, arranged books, and prepared lessons. By late afternoon, she was ready for the term to begin on Monday. Thomas was waiting outside with the wagon when she emerged. "Uncle Ethan had to ride out to check the north pasture," he explained, "but he'll be back for supper. Ma says you're to join us at the main house." Clara was tempted to decline, feeling she'd already imposed enough, but the thought of eating alone in the cabin was less appealing than company. The Morgan ranch house was larger than it had appeared from a distance. 2 stories of solid construction with a wide porch. A woman about Clara's age emerged as they approached. "You must be Miss Bennett. I'm Rebecca Morgan, Thomas's mother." She had a warm smile and tired eyes. "Please come in. You must be exhausted after your first day preparing." The interior was surprisingly refined for a frontier home, with solid furniture, colorful rugs, and shelves lined with books. "Your home is lovely," Clara remarked sincerely. "Thank you, my brother-in-law believes in making a proper home even out here." Rebecca led her to the kitchen where delicious smells wafted from several pots. "Ethan provided the means for these comforts after my husband passed. I managed the household in return." They were setting the table when the front door opened, and Ethan entered, removing his hat and dust-covered jacket. He stopped short at the sight of Clara. "Miss Bennett, I hope Thomas made sure you were comfortable in Sarah's cabin." "Very much so, Mr. Morgan. And thank you for the breakfast. It was most thoughtful." He nodded awkwardly, just being neighborly. At dinner, Clara observed the family dynamics with interest. Despite his gruff exterior, Ethan was patient and gentle with Thomas, asking about his day and listening attentively. Rebecca clearly respected her brother-in-law, though there was an underlying tension Clara couldn't quite identify. "Miss Bennett," Ethan said as they finished eating, "I realize the distance to town might be inconvenient. There's a gentle mare in the stable that could be yours to use while you're staying here." "I couldn't possibly," Clara began. "Consider it part of your lodging arrangement," he interrupted. "Can't have you dependent on Thomas or me for transportation." "Do you ride, Miss Bennett?" Rebecca asked. "I learned as a girl on my grandfather's farm," Clara admitted, "though it's been some years." "Then it's settled," Ethan said. "I'll have her saddled for you tomorrow morning, and we can make sure you're comfortable before you ride to town." Later, as Thomas walked her back to the cabin with a lantern, Clara found herself thinking about Ethan Morgan, his gruff kindness, the respect he commanded, the way his eyes softened when he spoke to his nephew. There was more to this rancher than met the eye, and despite her better judgment, Clara was intrigued to discover what lay beneath his weathered exterior. "Uncle Ethan doesn't talk much," Thomas said suddenly, interrupting her thoughts. "But he liked having you at supper, I could tell." "How could you tell such a thing?" Clara asked, amused. "He asked for the salt twice," the boy replied with complete seriousness. "He never asks for anything at the table, says it's poor manners." Clara laughed softly as they reached the cabin door. "Good night, Thomas. Thank you for the escort." Alone again, Clara lit the oil lamp and prepared for bed. Through her small window, she could see lights still burning in the main house. Somewhere in that building was a man who had shown her nothing but kindness since her arrival, expecting nothing in return. In Boston, men had clear motivations, often revolving around her father's modest fortune. But here, in this wild territory, she found herself unable to decipher Ethan Morgan's intentions, if he had any at all. 2 weeks into the school term, Clara had settled into a comfortable routine. Each morning she would rise with the sun, ride the gentle mare, whom she'd named Penny, to the schoolhouse, and spend her days teaching the children of Redemption Creek. Her evenings were often spent preparing lessons or reading by lamplight in the cozy cabin, though the Morgan family had made it clear she was welcome at their table whenever she wished. On this particular Friday afternoon, Clara dismissed her students with assignments for the weekend and began organizing the classroom. The town had been buzzing all week about the harvest festival scheduled for tomorrow, apparently an annual tradition that brought in folks from surrounding homesteads and ranches. A knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her thoughts. Ethan Morgan stood there, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mr. Morgan, what a surprise," Clara said, setting down the stack of slates she'd been collecting. "Miss Bennett." He nodded, still lingering in the doorway. "I was in town for supplies and thought I might walk with you back to the ranch if you're finished for the day." "That's very thoughtful. I'm nearly done here." As they walked together down the main street, Clara noticed several townspeople watching with interest. Mrs. Peterson, the general store owner's wife, gave her a knowing smile that made Clara blush slightly. "I trust the cabin is still meeting your needs?" Ethan asked after they'd left town behind. "Very much so. It's become quite homey, actually." Clara hesitated before adding, "I've been meaning to thank you properly for your generosity. I don't know what I would have done otherwise." Ethan kept his eyes on the path ahead. "No need for thanks. The cabin was sitting empty. Nevertheless, it was kind of you." She gathered her courage. "Thomas tells me you're not usually one to get involved in town matters." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Thomas talks too much. He admires you greatly. He's a good boy, going to make a fine man someday." After a moment of silence, Ethan added, I suppose the town's been telling stories about the reclusive rancher. Clara laughed softly. A few, though I prefer to form my own opinions. And what opinion have you formed, Miss Bennet? His question was direct, his gaze now fixed on her. I think you're a man who cares deeply about his family and this land, she replied honestly. Someone who values his privacy but isn't as isolated as some might believe. He nodded slowly. Fair assessment. After a pause, he continued, The Harvest Festival is tomorrow. I was wondering if you might accompany me. The invitation caught Clara by surprise. Yes, I'd like that very much. Good. He seemed relieved. Rebecca and Thomas will be coming too, of course. Of course, Clara echoed, trying to hide her slight disappointment at the clarification. They walked in companionable silence for a while before Ethan spoke again. How are you finding teaching here? Different from Boston, I imagine. The children are eager to learn, though their backgrounds and needs are quite different. In Boston, most of my students had at least some formal education before. Here I have some who've never held a book. Like Billy Thompson. Ethan nodded. His father can barely write his own name and sees little value in schooling. Clara was surprised. You know about my students? It's a small community, Miss Bennet, and I may keep to myself, but I pay attention. He glanced at her. Billy's been staying after school for extra help. That's good of you. He's bright but needs encouragement. His handwriting has improved remarkably. They had reached the fork in the road where the path to the cabin branched off from the main trail to the ranch house. Ethan stopped, seeming reluctant to end their conversation. Would you care to ride out to the west pasture with me? He asked suddenly. There's something I'd like to show you. Curiosity piqued, Clara agreed. They collected their horses, and Ethan led her across the rolling landscape. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they rode, the air growing cooler with the approaching evening. It's just beyond that rise, Ethan said, pointing ahead. As they crested the hill, Clara gasped. Below them stretched a meadow filled with wildflowers, their colors vivid against the green grass. A small stream cut through the center, reflecting the golden sunlight. It's beautiful, she breathed. Ethan dismounted and helped her down from her horse. My father discovered this place when he first settled here. Said it reminded him of a meadow back in Virginia, where he'd proposed to my mother. They walked toward the stream, the horses following behind. My sister Sarah used to come here to paint, Ethan continued. Said it changed with every season but was always perfect. I can see why. Clara bent to examine a particularly vibrant purple flower. We had nothing like this in Boston. Do you miss it? The city? Clara considered the question carefully. I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, familiar faces. But there's something about this place. She gestured to the vast landscape around them. There's a freedom here I never knew before. Ethan nodded, as if she'd confirmed something he already knew. Some people never adapt to the territory. They're always looking back, missing what they left behind. And others? Clara asked. Others find something here they didn't know they were searching for. His eyes met hers, and for a moment Clara felt as though he could see right through to her soul. The moment was broken by a distant rumble of thunder. Ethan looked up at the darkening sky to the west. Storm's coming, we should head back. They rode quickly, reaching the cabin just as the first heavy drops began to fall. Ethan helped Clara unsaddle Penny and stable her in the small lean-to beside the cabin. Thank you for showing me the meadow, Clara said as they stood on her porch watching the rain begin in earnest. I'm glad you appreciated it. He hesitated, then added, I'll come by around noon tomorrow for the festival, if that suits you. That would be perfect. After he'd gone, Clara stood watching the rain for a long time, her thoughts swirling like the storm clouds above. She had come to Wyoming seeking independence and purpose, not romance. Yet there was something about Ethan Morgan that called to her in a way no man ever had before. The next day dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed away any imperfections in the world. Clara dressed with unusual care in her best blue dress, pinning her hair in a softer style than her usual teaching bun. At precisely noon, there was a knock at her door. Ethan stood there in clean clothes, his usually unruly hair tamed, hat in hand. He stared at her for a moment before finding his voice. You look lovely, Miss Bennet. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. You're looking quite handsome yourself. Rebecca and Thomas were waiting in the wagon, both dressed in their Sunday best. As they rode toward town, Clara felt a growing sense of anticipation. This wasn't just any outing. It felt like a beginning. The town square had been transformed with bunting, tables laden with food, and a small band setting up on a makeshift stage. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between buildings, ready to illuminate the festivities once evening fell. "Clara," Mrs. Holloway waved her over, "come meet everyone properly. We've all been dying to get to know our new teacher better." As Ethan released her arm, he leaned close to her ear. "I'll find you later for the dancing." The promise sent a shiver of pleasure down Clara's spine. "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Morgan." The afternoon passed in a whirl of introductions, conversations, and sampling of the bountiful harvest foods. Clara found herself welcomed warmly by most of the community, though she noticed a few of the single women watching her with less than friendly eyes whenever Ethan was nearby. As the sun began to set, and the lanterns were lit, the band struck up a lively tune. Couples began forming for the first dance. Clara searched the crowd for Ethan, finally spotting him in conversation with several men near the edge of the square. Before she could make her way toward him, a young man she recognized as the bank clerk stepped in front of her. "Miss Bennett, might I have this dance?" Reluctantly, Clara accepted, not wanting to appear rude. As they joined the other dancers, she continued to glance toward Ethan, who now seemed to be watching her with an unreadable expression. The bank clerk, James Wilson, as he'd enthusiastically introduced himself, proved to be a capable dancer, but an exhausting conversationalist. Throughout their dance, he spoke incessantly about himself, the bank, and his aspirations to open branches in larger towns. Clara nodded politely, her attention divided between maintaining the steps and watching Ethan, who remained at the edge of the gathering. When the music ended, James held onto her hand. "Another dance, Miss Bennett?" Before Clara could formulate a gentle refusal, a deep voice spoke from behind her. "I believe Miss Bennett promised this next dance to me." Ethan stood there, his expression serious, but with a warmth in his eyes meant only for Clara. James reluctantly retreated as Ethan took Clara's hand in his. "Perfect timing, Mr. Morgan." She smiled up at him. "Though I don't recall making any specific promise about this particular dance. Consider it repayment for rescuing you," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly as he led her into position. "Young Wilson's been practicing that speech about bank branches for months. Every new woman in town has heard it at least twice." The band began a slower waltz, and Ethan's arm slipped around her waist, maintaining a respectable distance while still drawing her closer than James had dared. "I didn't know you danced, Mr. Morgan," Clara remarked as they moved smoothly among the other couples. "There's a great deal you don't know about me yet, Miss Bennett," he replied, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The simple "yet" in his statement sent a flutter through her chest. They danced in comfortable silence, Clara acutely aware of his steady hand at her waist, the subtle scent of soap and leather that seemed uniquely his. When the music ended, neither moved immediately to separate. "Would you care for some punch?" Ethan asked finally. "Yes, thank you." He led her toward the refreshment table, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Several townspeople nodded approvingly as they passed, making Clara blush slightly. "I believe we're causing quite a stir," she murmured. "Let them talk," Ethan replied, handing her a cup of punch. "Small towns run on gossip." "And what exactly will they be saying about us, Mr. Morgan?" He considered her question seriously. "That the reclusive rancher has finally met someone worth leaving his solitude for." The directness of his answer took her breath away. Before she could respond, Rebecca approached with Thomas in tow. "Clara, you must come see the quilts on display," Rebecca insisted. "The ladies' auxiliary has outdone themselves this year." With an apologetic smile to Ethan, Clara allowed herself to be led away. The quilts were indeed impressive, but Clara found her attention continually drawn back to where Ethan stood, now deep in conversation with several ranchers. "He's different with you, you know," Rebecca said quietly, following Clara's gaze. "I'm not sure what you mean," Clara replied, though her heart quickened. "Ethan, since James, my husband, died, he's carried the weight of everything. The ranch, our security, Thomas's future. He took it all on his shoulders." Rebecca adjusted a corner of one of the quilts. "I haven't seen him laugh or relax in 3 years. Until you arrived." "I've done nothing special," Clara protested. "You've done more than you know. simply by being yourself. Rebecca squeezed her arm gently. Just be patient with him. He's forgotten how to let people in. Before Clara could press for more information, Thomas tugged at his mother's sleeve, eager to show her something at another booth. Clara found herself alone, contemplating Rebecca's words. The evening continued with more dancing, food, and conversation. Clara was introduced to so many people that faces and names began to blur together. Throughout it all, she remained aware of Ethan's presence even when they were separated by the crowd. As the festival wound down and families with young children began to depart, Ethan appeared at her side once more. "May I escort you home?" he asked. "What about Rebecca and Thomas?" "They're riding back with the Petersons." Thomas fell asleep under the cider table. There was genuine affection in his voice. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. The moon cast enough light to illuminate the trail, and the stars seemed impossibly numerous above them. "I never saw stars like this in Boston," Clara remarked, tilting her head back to gaze upward. The city lights and smoke obscured all but the brightest. "Out here there's nothing between you and the heavens," Ethan replied. "When my father first brought us west, I'd stay up half the night just looking at them. It makes one feel rather small, doesn't it? Or part of something larger." They reached the cabin too soon for Clara's liking. Ethan helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I had a wonderful time tonight," she said softly. "As did I." He seemed to be wrestling with something internally before continuing. "Clara, I'm not a man of many words. Never have been. But these past weeks, having you here," he paused, searching for the right expression. "It's changed things, for the better." "I felt it too," she admitted. He took a step closer. "I don't want to presume anything. You came here for a new start, not to be courted by some rough rancher. Perhaps I didn't know what I was really looking for until I found it," Clara replied, echoing his words from the meadow. Ethan's expression softened. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, he leaned down and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but filled with promise. "Good night, Clara," he whispered, stepping back. "Good night, Ethan." She watched him drive away, her heart fuller than it had ever been. The weeks that followed took on a new rhythm. Clara continued teaching, growing more confident with each day as her students progressed. Ethan began making regular appearances in town, often timing his errands to coincide with the end of the school day so he could walk her home. Their courtship was unhurried but deliberate. Ethan took her riding across his land, showing her favorite spots and sharing stories of his family's journey west. Clara introduced him to her favorite books, reading aloud by the fireplace on cooler evenings. As autumn deepened toward winter, Clara realized that what had begun as a temporary arrangement had evolved into something permanent. The little cabin had become home in a way her father's house in Boston never had. The community of Redemption Creek had embraced her. The children were thriving under her tutelage. And most importantly, she had found a love she hadn't known was possible. One crisp Saturday morning in late November, Ethan suggested they ride to the wildflower meadow. Though the blooms were long gone, replaced by the golden hues of autumn grasses, the spot remained special to them both. They stood beside the stream, which ran faster now with the recent rains. Ethan seemed uncharacteristically nervous, shifting his weight and adjusting his hat repeatedly. "Is something wrong?" Clara finally asked. "Not wrong," he replied. "Just important." He took her hands in his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Clara Bennett, when you stepped off that stagecoach 3 months ago, something changed in this town. In my family." He took a deep breath. "In me." Clara's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. "I never expected to find someone who would make me want to open my life again," he continued. "Someone who could see past the gruff exterior everyone else knows to the man beneath." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold ring with a small, perfect diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her when they decided to journey west together. It seems fitting now." Dropping to one knee on the soft earth, Ethan looked up at her with all the love and hope she felt reflected in her own heart. "Clara, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of making a life with me here, raising Thomas together, perhaps having children of our own someday?" Tears of joy sprang to Clara's eyes. "Yes, Ethan. Yes, with all my heart." He slipped the ring onto her finger before rising to gather her in his arms, their kiss sealing the promise between them. As they rode back to the ranch hand in hand, Clara marveled at how completely her life had transformed in such a short time. She had come west seeking independence and found partnership instead. She had sought purpose in teaching and discovered that love could be the greatest purpose of all. The Morgan Ranch spread before them, no longer just a place where she was staying temporarily, but the home where she would build a future. Thomas and Rebecca were waiting on the porch, as if they somehow knew what had transpired. "Did she say yes, Uncle Ethan?" Thomas called out, bouncing with excitement. "She did," Ethan confirmed, his smile wider than Clara had ever seen it. Rebecca embraced her with tears in her eyes. Welcome to the family, truly. That evening, as they sat together at the dinner table, no longer as landlord and tenant, but as family, Clara looked around at the faces that had become so dear to her. In 3 months, she had found everything she hadn't known she was seeking. A community that valued her skills, a family that welcomed her with open arms, and a love that had been waiting for her at the end of a long journey west. Outside the window, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside, warmed by love and acceptance, Clara Bennett, soon to be Clara Morgan, had never felt more at home.